Welcome to the Cash Confident Podcast. I'm Bri Sedano, your fearless host, personal finance expert, and the visionary behind the revolutionary Cash Confident community. Oh, hello, wonderful people. Oh, fixing my microphone. Bri Sedano here, coming to you today. Today, we're talking about the 7 principles of limitless wealth. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, my journey, and then I'm going to teach you the 7 principles of limitless wealth. So, over the last few years, I have really dug in to manifestation, and it all sounds so woo, but it's really like, how do we create the life that we want is basically it. Like, where do we get that energy, the power, the ideas, the inspiration? Like, where does all of this come from? How do we tap into these places? Like, how come some people have so much momentum and energy and power, and other people like can barely get themselves out of their own way, or sometimes can't even get themselves out of their own way? And so I've been really studying this for a very long time. I've read in my Audible, I think I have 400 read books from the last few years. And I have a library of Kindle books and built-in bookshelves that I often have to like clear, right? I've spent a ton of money on courses, coaching, retreats, I don't know, shamanic rituals, then a handful of hallucinogens, right? And it's all, what's interesting is that my journey started really with money, really looking for more money, right? Like my first really big move was when I left working for a nonprofit to go into sales, which I had never done before, selling stocks and bonds, right? That was my first really big transformation. And then from there, I went into like planning. And then from there, I started my own business. So there's been a lot of really big transformations for me over the years. And some of what I'm studying really comes down to power. Like, where's your power? Where's your agency in these situations? But there's some principles that I've just noticed of the people who just, and when I say limitless wealth, money, but I also mean time, location, relationships, general well-being, happiness, health, stuff required to have a wonderful existence. That's what I mean when I say limitless wealth. Like, the money's a part of it, but the money's not the only thing, right? Because there's a ton of ways to make enough money to have a beautiful life and still not have a beautiful life, right? Like, people come see me and they're like making a ton of money, but they don't have time. They're making a ton of money, but they don't have health. They're making a ton of money, but their relationships are all not so great. And so anyways, I'm going to teach you some of the things that I've learned from all of my research and just from working with very successful people over the years. So when I'm talking about limitless wealth, I'm talking about the capacity for power to create, like to have what you want. Really, this is really it. And what I love about these principles, so listen, where I teach clients, I have a Cash Confident membership, and we're teaching a lot of money management there. But these 7 principles are woven in, but maybe they're not like, how do you get your business to 10x? They're like, how do you free up your time? Like, busy, broke, and exhausted. Busy, broke, and exhausted is the opposite of limitless wealth, right? That's where a lot of people are. And that's not about money. I've worked with people who are making $1 million a month, maybe not $1 million a month, but a lot of money, right? Who come see me busy, broke, and exhausted. And I see people who are busy, broke, and exhausted making 50,000, 75, 100,000, 200, 300, 400. It doesn't matter. And then I see people who are limitlessly wealthy at all incomes too. So this is about money, but it's not exactly it's not like money's a piece of it, but it's not the whole thing. So anyways, let me get into it. Let me just get into it. All right. I have my notes on the wall today. So if you are watching, you're going to see me looking at my notes because I just organized all my thoughts. And I'm a person who likes giant pieces of paper on my walls. That's if you didn't know that about me, now you do. All right. So one of the first principles of limitless wealth is tapping into true desire. This is one of the biggest and most important things. And there's a couple, there's the internal reason, which is it activates your heart. And then there's the external reason, which is it also activates the co-creative force of life. So here is what I understand about desires is desire is life working through you. Desires are not like, you don't get to choose them. You want what you want and you don't really get to pick. So that's something I've come to really see about desire, because people often want things that they don't want. They're like, I want this thing, but I feel judged about it. I don't want this thing that I want. So mentally, their sweet little ego brain is absolutely not hard no, but like their heart is, we're going for this. And oftentimes our desires don't make sense to our sweet little minds. Like we want things that make no sense, and that's okay. And so anyways, desire is one of the first places that if you want to have a limitless life, that juicy, big, abundant as fuck life, like desire is one of the places where you were to start. Now, what I will say about desire is that many of us are socially conditioned to not have full access to our desires, especially women. And that's old, it's social conditioning from hundreds of years. But desire, freeing up your desire, is one of the first places. And the thing about it is when you really, truly want what you want, you're braver. You're more brave and you're more willing to do what needs to be done, and life plays with you. So this is one of the critical components. Like when people are working towards something they don't really want and they're not really on the track of pure desire, it's significantly more difficult. Plus, you never really get that full life abundance because you're spending the bulk of your time doing something you really don't want to do, which is not limitless wealth. If you have to go to a job, let's just say you hate your job, but you make a ton of money. If you have to spend 8 hours a day there being miserable, being unhappy, doing things that don't fulfill you, it sets you off balance for the whole rest of your life. But when you're on the path of true desire, you have like extra superpowers because your heart is fully activated, and life comes in with all of the co-creative forces of the universe to put you in the right place at the right time, to introduce you to the right people, to make you aware of the right opportunities. And you in life are playing the game, but you're on the track that like where you're co-creating with life. And when you're not on desire, you're not tapping into the true potential of what your heart is willing to do. And you're also not tapping into what life is willing to give to you. You're just doing something for the idea. Most of the time, if you're not in your true desires, it's the ideas of safety, or it's the social conditioning that makes you judge your desires as wrong and bad and repress them, right? So that desire is the first principle of limitless wealth, that when you tap in to your true desire, that's the place. And Napoleon Hill, if you've ever read Think and Grow Rich, which is a good book, and I would suggest reading it, that's the opening chapter. He says you need a burning desire, right? And pretty much most people that are writing manifestation books talk about the pure desire of it. And this is why, is because on the internal side, your heart activates, and on the external side with life, you get all the co-creative juices. And getting your desires met is fun. This is where it comes into limitless wealth. Like getting what you want is delicious. It's fun. It's a great experience. It's like like on a hot day, maybe you're doing something outside, then you have a cold iced tea or a cold beer and you're like, oh, so good. It was just like perfect. It hit the spot. You know what I mean? So that's the first principle of limitless wealth. The second principle of limitless wealth that I find is that, are you ready? The impossible is usually easier than the very possible. So when clients come to see me, I have an offer called Limitless Wealth that's a mastermind, and people are typically coming to see me for their businesses in that context. And you know what, let me just start where I am. So when we're looking at possibilities, it requires a lot of mental energy. And so when we set a goal that's big, and I'm talking maybe big enough where you're like, I don't know if that could really be done, right? Like when you're setting a goal that's that big, now assuming it's also the truth of your desire, we don't want to be setting massive goals that we don't really want. That is not the way to have a delicious, juicy life. That is the way to be stressed out and terrified all the time. But when you're looking at like, all right, what do I want to create? What's this maybe business I want to create? What's this life that I want to create? What do I want to give to the world? If you're looking at the possibilities, oh, I want to make 10% more money, or I want to serve 10% more people, the amount of possibilities for how you could accomplish such a goal becomes infinite. There's probably 100 ways in your business that you can make 10% more money. And they each have strategies and plans, and for you to like mentally examine all of them will take a ton of mental energy, and it often will put you in a paralysis by analysis. Like a lot of times when people are doing paralysis by analysis, their goals are too small. Like when I'm listening to people talk and they're like, I want to make a little bit more money, and there's 55,000 ways that I could do it, and blah, 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 and my team and it's you're overthinking it. and you're overthinking it because your goal is too small. You have too many options to mentally examine. You could be at this for years and still not make the 10% more money, right? Because we have to understand that our mental resources are finite. You don't have, like, decision fatigue is real. Like, your mental energy, your brain only has a certain amount of glucose every day, and then you have to rest. You have to go play. You have to go do something else for your brain to come up with new ideas. And so that's so when we look at setting a really big goal, the amount of options for pathways usually come down to 3 or less. So if somebody says to me, oh, I want to make 10% more money, I'm like, all right, let's just say somebody comes to see me, they're making $100,000 a year. They want to make 10% more money. I'm like, okay, so you want to make, let's just call it $1,000 a month extra, even though that's more than 10%. I'm like, all right, you could sell more of this, you could sell more of that, you could offer this, you could, like, so many things. But if somebody says, all right, I'm making $1 million, or I'm making 100,000, I want to make 1 million, most of those options go away. They're like, all right, what got you here won't get you there. The vast majority of those options fall away. What this does for you is it allows you to direct your mental focus toward the things that are going to make the biggest impact. It creates so much clarity, and it allows you to align your actions towards that goal so much easier. A lot of times with businesses, people get stuck in the weeds, the day to day, and those are the things that keep us so small because we're thinking small. So one of the other principles of limitless wealth is really around, like, that big growth and expansion, that going almost, and it's not, and nothing's ever impossible, but it's going to the edge, to the very, very edge of what your mind can even tolerate, going just a little bit beyond that, because then all of those mental resources come together and you end up with much more agency over where your mind will go. And I'm going to give you, I was reading a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And the author asked the best little question here. He was like, so you take your goal out to where you think it's impossible, and then you ask yourself if this is it's impossible unless. That was the question. This goal is impossible unless, and then you start to add your conditions. And then that becomes like the basis of some of your plans. And so that's another possibility. So if you want to have like that juicy, unlimited life, setting goals or setting desires, setting your mind to the edges, just beyond the edges of what you think is possible, really helps those big transformations, because it frees up your mental resources. It frees up your mental resources. And so your brain then starts to untangle the challenge of, oh, how do we do this impossible thing, rather than examining the 55,000 pathways for you to make 10% more money this month. The idea that sometimes it's just easier to make more money than it is to make a little bit of money. Like, oftentimes, and the same principle, I'm going to explain this to you if you're at the beginning of a financial journey, maybe if you're still working in a W-2 job or whatever. Sometimes I say to people, they'll just say somebody comes to see me with a whole bunch of credit card debt and they really want to pay off their credit card debt. And I'm looking at their numbers and I'm like, you have to make more money. And they're like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, we could do the math and strip your life bare, but I promise you it will be easier for you to figure out a way to make more money. I promise you it will be easier for you to make more money than it will be to cut back every single facet of your life. And it will be more enjoyable, right? And that's advice that sometimes is frustrating for people to hear. But I'm like, do you want to really eat less groceries and less quality good food for the rest of your life? No, just make more money. And that bumps up against our limitations, right? So if you're listening to that and you're like, oh, this woman, it's supposed to bump up against your limitations. So if you think it's not possible, those are the places that you want to start to stretch your mind just beyond those impossibilities. So that's the second principle of limitless wealth, is that the impossible is often easier. The impossible is often easier. All right. The third principle, and these are in no particular order, also I'll say that. The third principle of limitless wealth is knowing how to let go. And this could be your tasks, your responsibilities, your projects, your stories, your beliefs, your habits, etc. So sometimes it's internal things like beliefs, stories, habits, actions, behaviors. Sometimes it's external stuff like relationships, tasks, projects. Right? But as we transform, not everything can always come with us. If we were already like ready for the next big thing, we would already have it. So we're not ready. So a lot of times some of the stuff that we have, we can't come with us. So we have to learn to let it go. So I'll tell you this last year, I've really been with myself working on letting go of control, right? Learning how to trust, learning how to surrender, right? Like those are skills that I didn't always have. And that I have been slowly learning how to let go of control. But I had a lot of control because I didn't always feel safe. And so then I take control of things. But when I have all my power in controlling things, I lose a lot of momentum. I lose a lot of steam. I don't go as fast. And it's harder. It's generally, for me anyways, it sucks. So letting go. And so oftentimes when this comes to business, if I'm going to focus my attention on the things that move the needle the most, that are the most impactful projects, the things that impact the most people, well, then typically that's going to mean that I can't be in the day-to-day stuff. It means I'm going to have to let go of certain aspects of my responsibility. It doesn't mean my business has to let go of that, but it means I can't personally be doing all the things. So maybe I need to hire somebody to get those tasks off my plate, which again, it costs control, right? Like I can't have perfect control if I'm hiring somebody else to do it. And this is why letting go it's not a thing that you just do once. It's a thing that you have to choose every day to be in this limitless space. So you often hear people say things like letting go of what no longer serves, but sometimes it's habits, sometimes it's behaviors. Like I'll tell you, I used to do a lot of drinking, right? That was part of my social life. I would go out for a drink with people. I'd be like, hey girl, you want to go out for a beverage? That was like my invite. But I can't do that anymore because it slows me down. It doesn't take much. If I have a glass of wine, a beer, a drink, the next day I'm slow in the whole morning. The morning is my most productive time of the day. And it's not that I'm getting so smashed that I'm hungover. It's just that my body when I like metabolize, it costs me something. I don't get as good of a night's sleep. And it's a habit that one day I did the math on it and I looked and I'm like, all right, this drinking costs me so much. What do I get out of it? And I'm like, almost nothing. Like I could literally go out, drink a seltzer water, have the exact same conversation, have the exact same amount of fun. So I'm like, this thing costs me something, but I really get nothing in return. And so that was a habit and a whole part of my social circle that I let go years ago. And I will still have a drink. I'm not like perfectly sober, but that's something I let go of, right? There's relationships that I used to have that I had to let go of that I couldn't take where I'm going now. So those are things that when it comes to tapping into the limitlessness of life, sometimes we have to be willing to let go of things, again, like that are internal, like our beliefs, our stories, our stuck emotions, our wounding, our whatever. And sometimes it's external stuff like tasks, projects, responsibilities, business partners, relationships, friendships, blah, 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 blah. So that's the third principle of limitless wealth. And the strategic letting go of stuff often will free people up for so much because it's generally your energy. Let me see if I have a good story. Listen, I had a client once who had this boyfriend and he was probably, I don't know him. I'm going to say he's a lovely person, but he was controlling and he was a tremendous emotional suck. She was always dealing with his emotions. Like she was always dealing with his emotions. He had this business that was actually not successful at all. And she was always trying to save his business. Oh, she was lending money to this business, which was not a great financial move and also not a great emotional move and all of this stuff. And then when she let him go, the look in her face was different. The amount of energy she had within maybe a year and a half, she was married to somebody beautiful, wonderful, who takes great care of her. She got a tremendous raise, big job difference. So when she was with this person, her income was small, her life was small. She was always dealing with his nonsense. She let that relationship go and she just flourished. And so that's limitless wealth. And that's in a personal sense. So again, like these things are financial things, but they're more than that. And it's the same thing. Like sometimes it's like we let go of I had a mentor once who had a membership that required a tremendous amount of time and attention. It was her lowest producing. It was like it required 80% of the effort in her business, but only produced 20% of the money. And it was very difficult for her to let it go. She let it go and her income skyrocketed because she wasn't using 80% of her energy on this task anymore. Right. And so this is why this is part of how you get to this limitless wealth, is learning what to let go of, learning how to let go of things. And I'll also tell you, this is just like an extra little bonus on this topic, is sometimes when we're up leveling in our life, it feels like our life is falling apart, right? Sometimes when things are going well, when we're actually doing the things, there's parts of our lives that are crumbling away, falling apart. They're letting go. And that can be hard and it can be scary. All right. I just want to also say that, but it's also so fascinating. This story is from a few years ago, but I was going through a massive transformation in my own life, right? Like in the way that I was teaching, the way that I was doing my business, whatever. And in the exact same month, I had, I think, 4 clients quit one of my high-end masterminds, which I've never had that. Like, it's so rare that somebody leaves one of my containers, like that signed the contract. It's super, super rare, like almost never happens. And I had 4 people in the same month, and none of them were for me. They weren't aligned with who I was becoming. They were aligned when they'd signed up, but in a very short amount of time, I went through a massive up level, and those clients weren't a fit anymore, and they just dropped away. But that was, I had to process that. I had some feelings about that, because I was like, am I doing something wrong? But I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just growing and expanding, and they weren't going to be able to be where I was going next. They were where I was. So we had a brief interaction, and all of them are lovely, and I'll follow them on Facebook and love them and stuff. But it just wasn't a fit, and I had to let them go. And that was part of what was required. And it was scary, and it was hard, and I was a little butthurt about it. Just saying. So letting go can be hard, but that's one of the principles that when you want to tap into the limitlessness of life, that's one of the skills that you're going to need. And it's an internal skill and an external skill. All right. I'm seeing that we are at 25 minutes. So I'm going to teach this next one, and then we're going to put in a part 2 for next week. All right. So the 4th principle of limitless wealth that we're going to talk about today is flow state. So there's entire bodies of work on flow state, but basically what flow state is, there's this magical place when you're doing your work where you get in the zone, and you can get done in a few hours what might take you half a week or maybe a whole week if you were not in the zone. And flow state, these workings in flow state, is where timelessness becomes a thing, where you get so in the zone and you're timeless, and you're just doing your work, and you're in the space of inspiration, and your focus is like a steady flow, and you get so much work done. What's required for a flow state is a balanced life. Like people, that's really what it comes down to. People who do their work in a flow state, the research, there's a ton of research around it. There's a fellow named just plugging away. I think his last name's Colter, Kolter, I believe. But they did a study about architects, and they had research on average architects versus the most highly paid, things that are required. Like, you need a good night's rest, you need to have time to play, famous architects. You need to have, gave them projects. Really, most of the things that contribute to a flow state are things that you do. The average accountant's got right to work. It's not about the way that you work. The thing that paid, one of the things that really does matter is distractions. Why would I waste my work time when I don't have an idea? If you're in a flow state and you get a big distraction, basically I'm waiting for the inspiration. Chances are you're not going to get back, and then I'm going to do my work. Flow state, obviously. So it's also about eliminating distractions. And I just thought that was so interesting, because the flow state is about how you work. They say things like about procrastinating, I don't get it done, but making your life set up so that way when you're working, did you get in your flow state? Let the inspiration, and it increases your level of productivity somewhere between 5 and 100 times, depending on what research. You have to be open to be in a flow state, right? And you also have to be well resourced. So those are some of the things also. But like when you mostly do your work in a flow state, the level of impact you make is so big, so fast, so much momentum. Like, you get so many more hours back when you do the bulk of your work in a flow state, when that's a state that you can achieve regularly. That was maybe 2 years ago. I did a whole retreat called Leveraged just on flow states. And it's one of the things that we work on inside the Limitless Wealth container. So look, I'm going to just do a quick recap, and then next week we'll learn the last 3 principles of Limitless Wealth. All right. So the first one was desire. And the desire helps you to activate your heart, your courage, your good ideas, your like enthusiasm, and it activates life to co-create with you. So when you're on the path of desire, you're moving with momentum because your heart is in it, and life is setting you up for success because you guys are working together. Desire is the place of the co-creation. Then we have the impossible is easier, right? And so this is the idea where we start to stretch our mind. We start to take our ideas really out, right outside of our comfort zones, right outside of our mental area of, does this make sense? And what that does for us is it reduces the amount of mental energy we have to spend figuring it out. It gets our options down to a couple options. It gets our pathways down to a couple pathways. And so then we can get into the planning, we can get into the execution. And it's easier because there's often less obstacles. Sometimes you have to be a little ballsier. You have to have a little bit more courage to do something you've never done before, but it's generally much easier to set very audacious goals for your business or for your life and then get them, rather than it is to just set something for a linear type growth. So it's looking at your goals exponentially versus linearly. Letting go. And we talked about letting go on the internal way, stories, emotions, beliefs, actions, habits, behaviors. And then sometimes it's the external things like tasks, projects, parts of our business, relationships, whatever else. So letting go is another principle that of limitless wealth. And that's really about, it's about how am I using my energy? It's really about energy management. Letting go is a waste. It's like budgeting, but for your energy. That's what it is. And then flow state helps us to, when we have a really big, full, juicy life and our relationships are good and we slept good and we have good food and we played and whatever, we come to our work so full that we have something to give. And when we're in that state of flowing, we get so much work done and then we have to go rejuvenate again, play again, right? And so this is one of the things where many of the people that I work with come see me in a state of busy, broken, exhausted, and they have no flow state. They couldn't get a no flow state because they're not well resourced. They haven't had a good night's sleep in 3 months. They're eating takeout food 5 days a week, not because they want takeout food, because they're exhausted. They're stretched too thin. They have too many things on their plate. They've said yes to too many things. And so they never are full. They're not rejuvenated. So they never get to that place of having that focus to give. So every day they're drugging their focus, and that's not the space of limitless wealth. That's the space of busy, broken, exhausted. So I hope that this was helpful for you. So next week for our podcast, we will do part 2 of the 7 principles of limitless wealth. And if you want to work with me on your business on limitless wealth, and it's full life abundance. When I'm working with people on limitless wealth, it's about money, but it's about so much more than money. There's a link you can click in the show notes that will take you to my calendar. You can send me an email if you choose, but we can talk about it. What's there for you in your business? Which of these 7 principles we want to get started working on for you, so that way you can have a life of limitless wealth, like full life, juicy abundance. All right. Okay. I love you. And I will talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.